true crime something, it says Yellow Cottage Tales. I honestly didn't know that it was going to end up being true crime when I launched it. Why don't I like true crime? Well, I like some true crime in the sense that I like a puzzle. I like to figure things out. I like to understand things. But for the most part, I don't like it because it's depressing. But I'm not knocking anybody else who does get something out of it. In fact, from what I've found, my theory on the people that do like true crime, and it's more women than men, is that they tend to be more empathetic than the normal person. And you say, like, how could an empathetic person get something out of somebody else's misery? But I think they do. I think they bond, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I think it's a good thing. I think that they bond with the victims. And that also makes that, so that does in a way kind of keep the victims alive in some way. And it enhances their own compassion and their own sense of justice. So I think it's a good thing that people are interested in this. I'm just not. It makes me feel kind of yucky, so I'd rather watch a movie or old episodes of Seinfeld or whatever. But once they go down a path of trying to solve something, then it's a little different because it engages the intellectual side of my mind. So I prefer the unsolved cases because it's something you can maybe look a little zoom out a little bit when it comes to looking at the victims and zoom in and try to look at the evidence. And that's more my approach. What? Kind of zoom out a little bit when it comes to looking at the victims.
You are listening to the Roberta Glass True Crime Report, putting the true back in true crime. From New York City, Roberta Glass is now on the record.
All right. How is everybody? So I had no plans to go live today. I had actually all these plans to work on my Patreon episode. But last night, Kevin Lenihan from Yellow Cottage Tales had on a killer. And no one sang anything. And I was absolutely revolted, morally repulsed by it. Platforming a killer. Now this killer, he's gone from being an artist to now he's a profiler. And what I'm saying, I don't think you guys are getting it. He's calling from prison. Actually, let's take a look little bit at his crimes before we even get into it. Absolutely ghosted the victims. And I thought it needs to be called out since no one's calling it out for what it is. Absolutely morally repulsive. And obviously, you know that this is a true crime, a victim-centered channel. So, of course, I'm going to feel this way. But I find too much of true crime is very complacent with this. A killer recalls himself a profiler and says he's quote unquote doing good, helping out, rehabilitated. And just so before we get into this, you know, I often talk about antisocial personalities. And let's look at those qualities before I go any further, because it's glib and superficial charm. smooth talking, verbally agile, grandiose self-worth. They boast and brag about the things that they have done, their skills and abilities. They seek stimulation or prone to boredom. They are always looking for excitement and entertainment. Pathological lying. Their lies can be cunning or extremely manipulative. Cunning and manipulativeness is number 5 on the psychopathic checklist. They deceive, cheat, con, bilk, trick, or defraud others for personal gain. 6, they lack remorse or guilt. There's often a disdain for the victims. We've seen that with Karen Reed. Remember, he's so frugal. First, he's the patron saint. She can't keep it for long. He's so frugal. He talks about how drunk he was. Shallow affect, emotional poverty, or very shallow feelings. 8, callousness and lack of empathy. A general lack of feelings towards other people. 9, parasitic lifestyle. They will exploit others for financial gain. 10, poor behavioral controls. They may be sudden outbursts of anger and temper, and they may act hastily. So Kevin says that a while ago, he tweeted that he was going to quit the Karen Reed case and quit true crime. Let's just look at that for a second. He writes, this is the last bit of his tweet. You want to read the whole tweet, it's in the show notes. So he's talking about the Karen Reed case. If Fox 25 reports evidence of a conspiracy tonight, I'll be excited for personal reasons. I get to retire from true crime. He's always threatening to retire from true crime, mostly retire. I do have a commitment to a long series of interviews and partnership with Bill Noguera, who is on death row. This is death row in California, and has been using his extensive knowledge of serial killers to help solve cold cases. Really? How's that worked out? I've spent a lot of time talking to him, and he's brilliant and fascinating. My first recorded interview with him is today at 1. So this is not the first video he's made with him. Won't be live, I'm afraid. He has a Netflix series coming out and a book in the spring. So this guy hasn't been platformed enough. Me and Bill hit it off. He hit it off with the killers, guys. Me and Bill hit it off because he's extremely intelligent. So what I'm wondering is if this killer groomed and conned him and told him, he's like, oh, Kevin, you're so intelligent. You got so many great insights. And conned him into using his platform. And you'll hear he says, well, my platform's not very big, so it's not going to have any impact on the victim's family. I mean, I think that's what he means. Jovita Navarro is the word never mentioned in this. The victims, never mentioned, never brought up, never mentioned. It's just the killer this, the killer that. Nowhere will you see Jovita Navarro's name mentioned. And we'll get into his crime in a second. But I really enjoy talking to people with so many insights. Okay, wait. I have no illusions about the horrific nature of his crime in 1983. But I really enjoy talking to people with so many insights. Like, yeah, his crime was horrific, but he's got a lot of insights. So whatever happens tonight, that project will proceed. Don't try to stop me from being groomed and conned by a killer and re-victimizing the victim's family with my content. Don't try to stop me. It's going to proceed full steam ahead. But Karen Reed, I may retire from true crime, but I'm still going to be talking to this kid. But if there's a conspiracy, I'll do one last show on Karen Reed. Okay. Well, boy, that was a promise broken. If there's a conspiracy, I'll do one last show on Karen Reed. The Mia Copa show, then retire from the subject and other true crime, except the Noguera interviews. Okay, except for those. Those are so special because he's so special and so insightful that I got to keep those going. However, my information about what will be reported tonight does not make it likely I can retire. Very much the opposite, I'm afraid. Oh, he got so close once again to almost retiring. I mean, this guy promised at least Frank Sinatra, who retired and came back like a zillion times. At least he actually retired for a little bit. This is like the constant threats of retiring. There is a conspiracy, more than one, but if not, it does not involve the McAlberts. Karen Reed killed John O'Keefe. I think after tonight, more people will start to understand, but we'll see. There's other big stuff this week too, so stay tuned. Other big stuff. Okay. Other big stuff. Okay. And I do plan to stream this live tonight. Okay. So you guys get the idea. So what did Yunita Navarro's killer do? Let's get into it. So this was a murder done, killed with his girlfriend, their mother, for insurance money. So, sorry, spoiler alert. And so let's start off with the accomplice. Youth facility ordered for woman and mother's death. Sorry, hold on one sec. An 18-year-old in La Habra convicted of murdering her mother so she and her boyfriend could collect $26,500, $26,500, in life insurance benefits, was committed Wednesday to the California Youth Authority. Dominique Navarro, who was 16 on April 24th, 1983, when her mother, Jovita Navarro, was found beaten and strangled in her bedroom, can remain in CYA custody no later than her 25th birthday, according to the terms of her sentence handed down by Superior Court Judge James F. Judge. District Attorney Richard King had recommended that Navarro be sentenced to state prison for 25 years to life. The severity of the crime, and because Navarro still denies to this day any part of the crime. I can just say I was disappointed, but I respect the judge's decision, King said. King argued at Navarro's jury last November that she and her boyfriend, William Noguera, now 21, conspired to murder Mrs. Navarro, an employee of County Social Services Agency, for the purpose of collecting the insurance money. Noguera is scheduled to stand trial for murder next month. King said Noguera faces the death penalty because of the allegation that the crime was committed for financial gain, a special circumstance, King added. So in California, thanks to DA George Gascon and his pro-criminal policies, he's getting rid of all those special circumstances like committing a crime with a gun, committing a crime for financial gain. So he's limiting the sentences that way by just getting rid of it's also sometimes called special circumstances. All right. And let's get into The Guardian, so I just want to give you the background. So Kevin may have no illusions about the horrificness of the crime, but I don't want you to have any illusions about the horrificness of this crime and how manipulative and cunning this killer is. This is The Guardian, which is about as pro-criminal as they come. This is their article on him, they call it Escape Artist, the life of a painter living on death row. So William A. Noguera committed a brutal murder and has spent almost 30 years waiting for execution. But in a new book, the artist explains how painting changed his life. And this article is more than 6 years old. So he's been promising this book that's coming out for more than 6 years. And Kevin Lenihan is like, oh, it's just coming out this spring, any minute. We used to have a Son of Sam laws, which meant that criminals couldn't profit off of their crimes, particularly. And I don't know if I believe that was particular to killers, but it was gotten rid of thanks to Henry Hill, who's the subject of the Wise Guys book. He wrote this book called Wise Guys, which was bought to be made into a movie. And when it was bought to be made into a movie, the book publisher fought these Son of Sam laws and got rid of them all over the country. So now any killer can profit off of their crime. So William A. Noguera has spent the previous execution hold on. He lives alone in a tiny cell in San Quentin Prison, California. The previous execution in the state was in 2006, meaning California still has the death penalty, but hasn't seen an execution in a really, really long time. But Noguera lives with his death sentence hanging over him every day. Okay, so they're basically trading places, making him the victim. But against that backdrop, Noguera has become an intentionally recognized artist. His hyper-realistic compositions and abstract paintings exhibited in Paris, New York, and London. In a new book, Escape Artist, Noguera charts the abusive upbringing that preceded him committing the crime while documenting in brutal detail the violence and isolation he faces daily in San Quentin. And that seems to be something he likes to do in this interview. And he seems to really like, as a quote unquote armchair profiler from prison, he really likes revisiting the details of the crime. The crime that he talks about with Kevin is very close to how he committed his own crime. One of the most, with a few differences, but he seems to really salivate talking about it. One of the most violent prisons in the U.S. The later forms the backbone of the book in a gripping insight into an unimaginable life. Isn't it crazy the way our press writes about these killers? They live such an unimaginable life, so rare. They have such rare insight. We need to bring them out more because they can help society, while completely obscuring the victim and the victim's family. And I know in this case, the victim's family member is also is the accomplice. So I'm not suggesting we focus on her, but come on. When we talked over the phone from San Quentin, the authoritarian conditions Noguera faces every day are unavoidable. So this guy likes to reach out from prison and manipulate and get people on his side. Hey, you got to write this article about me. I have this book coming out. I'm doing this. My painting's so important, and talking himself up. A message from prison prefaces Noguera's call. This call and your telephone number will be recorded, and we talk in 15-minute intervals, which is what Kevin did last night. Before the call is cut off and Noguera calls back, it made me remember a lot of things I never wanted to remember, Noguera says of writing Escape Artist. It was very emotionally draining. Oh, yeah, I'm sure. Never mind that the victim's family is never the same again, and they're sentenced to a life sentence of grief. It was emotionally draining for him to write this book. The troubles. I remember spending many hours after writing a chapter, basically in tears. Guys, it brought the killer to tears. Where's your empathy? This killer was brought to tears writing his own book. But what it brought me to was clarity. Oh, now the killer has clarity, meaning that he's somehow really reflected on his crimes, and it's somehow bringing him closer to rehabilitation. That's the underlying message there. I was able to sit down and really look at and remember certain points in my life where I made decisions where I could have gone a different way. Oh yeah, like killing your girlfriend's mother for money brutally. Yeah, that would have been a good idea to go another way. Because you're sorry you've been caught. You're not sorry you did it. You're sorry you got caught. The book alternates between chapters on Noguera's life in prison and an autobiography of his life leading up to incarceration. Noguera was sentenced to death in 1988. So this is a different date here. Maybe that's the sentencing. Okay, for the murder of Jovita Navarro, his girlfriend's mother. His girlfriend had been pregnant, and Noguera says her mother forced her to have an abortion. Oh, I don't know if this is a new line. Gone is that they killed her for money, for her insurance policy. That's now been removed, and it's really the mother's fault because she forced her daughter to have an abortion. Okay. I wonder who fed who that line. How much do you want to bet the killer fed that line to the journalist? And the journalists, they just write it down. Just like Gretchen Voss, just write it down. Oh, they just take these killers' words as fact. A talented karate fighter. Gosh, this killer is so multifaceted and talented, isn't he? Noguera had been taking steroids for years at his father's behest. It's his father's fault. Gosh darn that father for making him take steroids. In the book, he writes experiencing roid rage. Oh, gosh darn it if that father hadn't made him take those steroids. And on the night Navarro was killed, Noguera says he blacked out because, he's got to have no memory of any of the really brutal parts of the crime. Hi, anybody remember Jodi Arias? This is a How about Jeffrey McDonald? Everybody always forgets the brutal parts of the crime. Medical testimony released at the trial showed that Navarro had been beaten to death with a heavy object and strangled. You guys getting the horror of this? After 4 years in Orange County Jail, Noguera was moved to death row, where he spent almost 30 years in a cell 4 feet wide, 9 feet long, and 7.5 feet high. He writes about, and this is all for a tiny bit of money. Again, I think of Fargo and the end of Fargo. All for just a tiny bit of money, and really for the satisfaction of a psychopath. They enjoy this stuff. He writes about his first steps towards becoming an artist after 4.5 years in Orange County Jail. He was sentenced to death on the 29th of January, 1988. He was moved to San Quentin Prison near San Francisco days later and has spent the last 30 years on death row. The claustrophobia of his confinement. Oh, guys, he may have killed someone, but he's experiencing claustrophobia. Come on, where is your empathy? Has been an inevitable influence. Okay, I'll rewind for those of you who aren't getting the full sentence. This is so ridiculous. The claustrophobia of his confinement has been an inevitable influence on his work. Some of Noguera's most recent pieces. Oh, okay, they're not pictures, they're pieces. Divide the canvas into geometric shapes representing the angular lines of his confinement. Guys, he's channeled this all into his art. Isn't this amazing? Isn't this killer incredible? let's all forget about that little thing he did in 1983 for a tiny sum. I mean, it obviously was worth more in 1983, but tiny sum for a woman's life. And for someone that he had to have had some contact with, meaning if you look at my work carefully, you'll see that everything is compartmentalized. As a prisoner, every aspect of my life is compartmentalized. When I go to the shower, I'm locked into a small cage, a geometric square. When I return to my cell, it's the same thing. When I walk down the tiers, I'm enclosed in compartments. So I'm painting the landscape of my confinement. So this is the same thing that a lot of killers love to do, which is to say that no one's suffering as much as that they are. They're the ultimate victim. It's nothing they did. It's they're just in the worst conditions ever. They love to exaggerate how terrible life is in prison. It was during his first days on death row that Noguera turned to art. He had drawn as a youngster, but not for years. Using some scavenged pencils, he drew a mural on the walls of his cells. See, guys, he's resourceful too. Tears streamed down my face as I drew and poured out my deepest emotions. Gosh, everything makes this guy cry. He's crying when he's writing his book. He's crying when he's making his pictures. See, because he has so much empathy for and so much feeling inside him. He's not a manipulative, cold-hearted psychopath, because they wouldn't be crying when they were making pictures or writing their book. This is some manipulative garbage. For the first time in years, I'd found a part of me long ago hidden in order to protect it from all the brutality. See, deep down under this tough exterior, I'm just a softie. Really, the sensitive. Oh, here it goes. The sensitivity with which Noguera writes about his art and emotional state is juxtaposed with his descriptions of the violence he witnesses and perpetrates among his fellow inmates. So he likes to relive that too by writing it down. Noguera refuses to join any prison gangs, which leaves him exposed to attacks. He does not shy from talking about the violence he feels. He's forced to commit to survive. So according to him, he's too pure, guys. He's too moral to join any prison gangs. And for that, he also suffers. So if you don't think that this is all a deeply well-crafted narrative to get himself off death row and out of prison, maybe you were born yesterday. As a karate champion, some special kind of karate champion, he writes clinically about those altercations. He has been attacked with a shank, a crudely fashioned blade, and on more than one occasion describes them vividly, because he really seems to like to describe violence vividly. So you get the idea. This goes on and on and on. Let me see if I can finish this out. It's just so hard to take for me. As his blade kissed my flesh, my fist connected with his eye socket, and I followed through with strikes to the throat and face. He dropped the piece and I kicked him in the groin and finished him with a crushing blow to the jaw, is how Noguera describes an attack in San Quentin. Understand that I live in a world where one must speak the language spoken. Here, that language is violence. And he seems to be fluid in the language of violence, doesn't he? When we speak, Noguera said he lives in fear every day, alone in his cell. He is safe, but his daily trips to the prison yard where he runs, works out, and practices martial arts are when he feels vulnerable. Each day I walk out of my cell, I always say the same thing I've said for 4 years, Today they'll try and kill me. And I go out there with a mind frame because not to do so would be the most foolish thing in the world. The matter-of-fact way Noguera describes the constant threat match with the way he writes in the threat matches with the way he writes in Escape Artist. The chapters charting his life leading up to the murder of Navarro are tinged with sadness and regret, but the tone when he focuses on the life in prison seems to be more of acceptance. For one thing, Noguera feels that his experiences in the inmate are what turned him from someone skilled at drawing into an artist. I don't think I would have become the artist I am today or the author that I am today had I not come to prison. It wasn't until that I came here that I found that piece of me to evolve into truly being artist. So it's the same idea. So if I didn't come to prison, I wouldn't be an artist. If I hadn't killed Jovita Navarro, I wouldn't have the insights that I have as a quote unquote profiler. I mean, so this is the same grift, different subject. So I'm going to stop there with that and get into Kevin's episode and really the way he describes it. But when you kill someone, you silence them forever. And that is something that these psychopaths really get off on, is that now the world just has their word of what happens. They control who lives or dies. They control who's heard, and who's heard most is the killer. You can't go to the victim. And they've totally erased them and what power they have. So when you platform this, you're really feeding into the psychopathic's ego and right into their hands. And he seemed to have manipulated this Guardian writer, seems to have manipulated Kevin, unless Kevin is feeling simpatico with him and is using him right back. And this is a psychopath. I don't know. I mean, what are the options here? Because he says in the opening here, people don't like it when I have this killer on. It's not helpful to my channel. Like, people have warned him, like, hey, this is really distasteful and we don't like this. And he insists on doing it because either Navarro's telling him and playing up to his ego, it feels like it's giving his channel some kind of cachet. I've had real profilers, real killers, and real people who understand the criminal mind on my show. No, you've been used by the criminal mind is what you have been. And you've re-victimized the victim's family and you don't seem to care because doesn't it make you feel yucky, Kevin? All right, let's get into it. So I just want to point out one thing before I start. So this is the way he writes about it. Bill Noguera, this is Bill Noguera spent 39 years on San Quentin's death row and seeking redemption. Who says that? That's your assumption. Used his time to get in the heads of serial killers, becoming the most unique, the most one of a kind. Unique means one of a kind. The most one of a kind profiler in the world. Recently, his sentence was commuted to life. And see, because that's what they're doing in California. And he continues his work trying to develop insights into cold cases. He has a new book coming out in the fall based on an old case he helped solve. Says he. Does anyone else say that? Tonight, we discuss 3 cases, and he goes into them, and they're all horrific and awful. Karina Homer, and then that's the last he's mentioning of a victim's name, I guess, here. Afterwards, I'll update on the Karen Reed case. Okay, so let's get into it, and let me just skip forward to the beginning here, guys. He's this long, countdown intro. Hold on, let me see if I can just skip forward. Here we go.
We have separation.
A little bit in a moment in a nonpartisan way, but I do agree with you. I just want to bring this up on the stage for a moment. This is something that somebody sent me. It's a little disturbing, and I want you guys to see it. That's a switchblade in his hand. You know, I guess like I have a better version. She sent me multiple videos of this, and if I have time, I'll go grab another one. But this guy is. The story behind this is I did an episode. I can't even.
All right, let's just skip forward past this.
The Katrina Homer case. Torso series to the one just because at the fact that he was dating this person, this Swedish nanny. There's no other reason. There's no evidence against him at all. But just the mere mention of this subject.
There's no evidence, but I'm going to continue to talk about it because I'm an armchair profiler and I know better, having no experience in this area.
It's been talked about in other circles. So she said, okay, I understand that. But she posted something relative as a response to that episode on Twitter or something like that. I'm not sure exactly, or on the video. She posted it somewhere. And as a result, and well, just probably a coincidence, or maybe not a coincidence, the very next day, this guy showed up. She lives in it. I'm not going to name what she said on pulling time. Yeah, just some of them become good sources. Some of them don't. You don't really, people get drawn to big public cases like this. And so you just don't know. And so you want to try to approach it respectfully, responsibly.
That's where I wanted to start. Thank you. My apologies for not having it queued up exactly right. So he says you want to approach a true crime case respectfully. And this is his intro to having on a convicted killer doing life sentence. So if you get a life sentence at 18, what you've done is pretty horrific. But he's going to go into the brain overclaim syndrome. So this idea that your brain isn't fully developed, which has been used by defense attorneys and to push through and the wrongful conviction movement in general, basically to push through pro-criminal laws that make it easier. If you've listened to my episodes with Jane from the National Organization of Victims of Juvenile Murderers, they're trying to end life without parole for juveniles all over the country. So if you get life and this guy got the death penalty at 18, what you did was pretty horrific.
I think that's important. Let me take this guy off for now. Okay. So let's talk about tonight's show too, because this is also a little bit controversial for some people. I'm going to be interviewing someone who's in jail.
Yeah, it's not morally repulsive. It's not stomach turning. It's not absolutely. It's not absolutely turn the YouTube off. Revolting. It's just a little controversial, guys. I hope you'll have some patience for his controversial episode.
Jail for murder. And now I've had him on the show before, and I've talked to him a lot on the side, and we've done recorded shows. Why would I do this? People get mad saying, why are you platforming a killer? Well, let me explain why, and you can decide if you think my rationale is legitimate or not, or if you're interested in listening to him or not. I'm not a huge fan of true crime. I've said that many times. I don't.
Right. See, he somehow feels superior to his audience. See, I'm not interested in all this stuff. I find it depressing. I don't want to think about what happened to the victims. But getting to talk to a killer, that's really fun. Can't wait to do that. Can't wait to do a series of episodes from this guy's jail cell. Kevin, wake up. What is going on? You're being used by a psychopath. Think about the ramifications of what you're doing. You're amplifying the voice of a psychopath. Think about how the victims' families feel. Victims' family feels and other victims' families. Like, you know what I mean?
Don't watch true crime in my spare time. I don't watch other podcasts, other shows. I don't watch the Netflix series. I know it sounds weird because I'm doing a lot of true crime now, right? But that's why the name of this channel doesn't say true crime something. It says Yellow Cottage Tales. I honestly didn't know that it was going to end up being true crime when I launched it. Why don't I like true crime? Well, I like some true crime in the sense that I like a puzzle. I like to figure things out. I like to understand things. But for the most part, I don't like it because it's depressing. But I'm not knocking anybody else who does get something out of it. In fact, from what I've found,
Yeah, it's depressing. I don't like thinking about the victims. I don't like to think about a life being taken. I don't like to think about this sad thing that happened, that was made to happen by the person that I'm about to interview and platform, and who's so fascinating that you got to listen to him. You don't even just have to listen to him once. You have to listen to him multiple times on my show because I got to keep him coming back because he's profiling. He's got so much help. He's got so much insight as a quote. Right? Who cares about Jovita Navarro? Who cares about her? She may have just been average, but the killer is remarkable. Where have we heard this before? Anybody listen to a little podcast called Serial? Same narrative. Adnan Syed is extraordinary. Heyman Lee may just have an average teen's diary, just be an average teen, but Adnan Syed was remarkable. So far from the truth, too.
My theory on the people that do like true crime, and it's more women than men, is that they tend to be more empathetic than the normal person. And you say, like, how could an empathetic person get something out of somebody else's misery? But I think they do. I think they bond, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I think it's a good thing. I think that they bond with the victims. And that all.
Oh, you women are always bonding together. Even after death, and after murder, you still bond together the way men and women can't in life. This is so misogynistic. I'd rather watch Seinfeld than bond with a dead victim.
Also makes that does in a way kind of keep the victims alive in some way, and it enhances their own compassion.
There's no way to keep them alive. You can keep their memory alive. You can try to keep their memory alive. You can try to keep their spirit alive, but they've been silenced, taken off the earth, and these families and friends have been sentenced to a life sentence of grief. There is no closure for these families. It never ends. The pain never ends. It never stops. Yeah, doesn't that make you feel kind of yucky, Kevin? Kind of yucky?
Passion and their own sense of justice. So I think it's a good thing that people are interested in this. I'm just not. It makes me feel kind of yucky, so I'd rather watch a movie or old episodes of Seinfeld or whatever. But once they go down a path of trying to solve something, then it's a little different because it engages the intellectual side of my mind. So I prefer the unsolved cases.
Right. Because then I can use my superior intellect and my evidence plus logic. Wait, I think you should have rewritten this, Kevin, for night, right? Evidence plus logic equals And plus killer on the channel equals cognitive dissonance. This is madness, what you're doing. Absolute madness. You're talking out of both sides of your mouth. This is nonsense. You've been manipulated by a killer. The sooner you wake up and smell the coffee, the better. We all can be conned. The only one who says they can never be conned or fooled is the mark. If you've ever heard that line, I firmly believe it, that we can all be fooled. We can all be conned. We can all be manipulated. But to be warned, to be told, and then to just continue on with this like you're doing something important or it's important to you, I find very disturbing. What are you doing? And the silence, and the silence in my side of the Karen Reed case is deafening. Because everyone's like, well, no, we don't want to criticize Kevin because we only have a few people out here talking facts with the Karen Reed case. So we don't want to criticize. All the more reason. Boy, you really lose the moral high ground, right? When you say you're to the Karen Reed people saying, why are you supporting a killer when you're supporting a killer on your channel?
Because it's something you can maybe look a little, zoom out a little bit when it comes to looking at the victims and zoom in and try to look at the evidence. And that's more my approach. And really, so why do I continue doing this? I mean, I haven't really decided whether or not how long I will continue to do this, how much I will continue to do it, even after
the Karen Reed case. Come on, guys, he might retire. He's threatened to retire once again. And I feel for Kevin because he has stage 4 cancer. I mean, that cannot be fun to deal with. But you might have limited time. You don't know how much more time you have on this earth. And this is how you're devoting your time. This is what you're doing with your time, devoting it to talking to a killer. Come on. Wake up.
Karen Reed case, which has now become all absorbing, right? Is it worth it to continue? It's hard to say. I want to say this honestly, and I don't want people to get upset about it. Listen, most things in life I'm not good at. Many things. I can't fix a car. Okay. I can't do your taxes for you. I'm not that great with technology. You've seen my channel enough to know that. I don't love it. I get a little frustrated with it. But I'm pretty good at logical analysis. I don't find it hard. I think it's usually just a matter of trying to get back earlier into the process. Picture the whole thing.
I don't want anyone to get upset about it, but I'm really brilliant analyzing things, especially the legal system and trials, even though it appears that I've never seen a trial before and I'm not really sure how the legal system works. I'm super great at analyzing it. And I mean, come on. There's one thing to be like, I haven't seen a lot of trials. I'm learning with my audience. But there's another thing to come at it like, hey, guys, I no one knows this case better than I do. I've heard Kevin say that. I have a superior way of a superior intellect. Evidence plus logic equals truth. And how about YouTube channel plus killer equals BS? How about that calculation for today? This is nonsense. Throw in the towel, retire from this series. It's repulsive, morally repulsive. It's not a little controversial. It's morally repellent, repulsive. Quit it. finally, or just find, if you don't like true crime, no one's forcing you to talk about it. Go talk about sports, talk about something else you're interested in, do what you love. But this constant saying I hate this subject, but I'm going to talk about it once again is really bizarre.
Thing like a tree of logic, and you get all these different branches. The further back on the tree you can get, right down to the stump, the better chance you have of solving the crime. So you want to just eliminate paths. And the first,
just like your guest eliminated Jovita Navarro's life. Look at that.
First, not the first case that I spoke about publicly myself, before I was narrating cases. Before I was narrating, I was researching and writing the case and having a professional narrator do, and then I would do the video editing for it. And the first case I started talking about myself was the Lizzie Borden case, and that was a case that I actually had read all of the documents, spent a lot of time doing it. That case fascinated me. Yes, that's dark, but it's a century ago, more than a century ago, so everybody's gone. So I didn't feel the same, and there was a legitimate mystery there, so I ended up doing a 7-part series on it. And after I was done that, somebody said, I wasn't sure if I was going to do any more true crime. I'm just as happy doing a Bigfoot story. I don't believe in Bigfoot. I like Bigfoot. I love Bigfoot stories. Same thing with aliens or whatever. It's entertainment to me. And somebody said, why don't you do the Delphi murders? And I was like, is that Snapchat killing? I really wasn't even that familiar with it. And this was with Abby and Libby in Delphi, Indiana. And this is before it was, just coincidentally, it was when I took it on, it was a couple of months before they caught Richard Allen, who's going on trial in October. Now, what I'm going to say, again, it's going to sound like I'm patting myself on the back. I'm really not, well, not too much. I want to just explain how the process works, at least how my mind works, and where maybe sometimes I can have a small contribution to things like this. So looking at all the evidence, Delphi, Indiana is a small town of a couple of thousand, and the communities around it are all like population 40, so a very rural area in Indiana. And the area where the girls were killed is something that pretty much only locals would know about. So it was not automatic, but it was very likely that the killer was from within that population. There were witnesses who saw the person who was likely the killer, and you got some partial descriptions. And though the age varied, mostly it seemed to be the consensus was the killer was in his 40s. Okay, so we knew something about it. Now, when you have a small population pool like that, that actually gives you a chance to much better chance to solve the crime, because now you're starting out with the
Right. And how did you do? Did you solve the Delphi case from the comforts of your own home? I don't think so. Are you patting yourself on the back because you said it was someone local?
this manageable list of suspects, and you start whittling it down. Now, so you right there, you got age, right? So I researched what was the number of men in the town between the age of 25 and 50 or 55, I forget, I think 50. And what I came up was a list of about 500 people. So again, a workable list. That's when I also decided to come up with my own profile. I have no training as a profiler, but it's based simply on logical deduction. There were no similar killings in that area ever. Certainly not in the modern world. So there was not. So whoever killed this person, these girls, was likely a first-time killer, and yet the descriptions had him in his 40s. That struck me as unusual. Usually these guys start in their 20s, right? A lot of times 27 almost seems like to be the magical age that they start at, although there's a lot of variety, but they don't usually start in their 40s.
Weren't their names, I'm not super familiar with the Delphi case, but weren't their names Abby and Libby?
if they're going to start in the 40s, GT, I don't know why you're saying that. If they're going to start in their 40s, why? Why do they wait? Because the people that have these kind of fantasies start in their in adolescence. That's when they start thinking about this stuff, and that's when they start developing these fantasies. Now,
Okay.
for someone to make it all the way,
take note of that. So people who have these kind of fantasies of killing people, they started in he knows this to be true. They started in their adolescence. Hold on to that thought for later. And anybody just to note, anybody who made this kind of program on either side of the Karen Reed case, I would be calling it out. So this is not personal to Kevin. I just find this, like I said, personally, morally repugnant.
way into their 40s without acting on their 40s, you have to ask yourself why. And what I just logically concluded was this is someone that fit into the community, maybe as a school teacher, maybe as a cop or whatever. But I think what caused him to what caused him to contain his fantasies and not act on them was that he had a sense of himself as not being a killer. So you have these desires to do something horrific. But on the other hand, you have this sense of yourself as being a family man, maybe a good father. And that's what I decided was likely the case here. And this is why he hadn't killed before. And so I concluded, just deduction on that it was a guy who probably had a child, a daughter, who had recently left the house. And because he had left the house, that either triggered the killer out of the sense of loss. If you're a psychopath, you tend to have that ownership. You view people in your own family in an ownership kind of way. Sorry, meant to say Turtle Boy is a nut job. What? All right. You don't have to pay us to say that, but
right, like almost like you would own the mother of your girlfriend and get power out of ending her life and profiting off of it, almost like that. So is he giving himself credit for narrowing down the Delphi case? I guess he is.
Sorry, you got distracted by GT. Anyways, it made sense to me that this guy had contained his urges because he saw himself as a good family man, as a good father, and that but that something had changed very recently in his life that changed all that. And so I speculated that he had a daughter that had just left high school to go to college. Now, just coincidentally, 3 weeks after I put out that profile, they caught Richard Allen, and who had not been on anybody's suspect list. But he fit that profile exactly. The only thing that was different was he has one kid. It's a daughter. And instead of being someone who had just left to go to college, she's someone that had just got engaged 2 months before. 2 months before. So this triggered him in different ways. Well, for one thing, it probably created more opportunity because now she's not in the house. But I think it also would have thrown somebody with a psychopathic mindset thrown him for a loop, kind of, because he would have viewed this daughter in kind of an ownership kind of way. Anyways, that was my attempt at profiling. It seems to have worked. Maybe I got lucky. And there's been a few other things that I've turned out to be pretty accurate on. Also in the Richard Allen case, I predicted that they would find signs of antlers, symbols of antlers at the crime scene. And I gave a reason for why. I'm not going to go into it now, but that turned out to be true too. In fact, I even titled the video Antlers. You can see it on my channel. It's still up here. It's an old video. So that's why I do this. I think maybe sometimes I bring something to the table, as do all the other people that I work with. Kate, Jen Coffindaffer, and everybody here in chat, I think, and a lot of other people that talk to me on the side, they all bring their own insights. And I think it's kind of growing in that way. And we just want to apply evidence and logical analysis to hopefully get something closer to the truth. So that's where my guess.
Right. And sometimes we want to add a convicted killer to the mix. Sometimes we want to add a killer to the mix because they add so much, guys.
Yes, tonight will come in. He's going to be calling me from Corcoran State Prison in California at 8:30. Bill Noguera committed murder when he was 18 years old. He's not a serial killer. He doesn't have those kind of urges, but he killed his girlfriend's mother. I don't claim that he deserves redemption.
Okay, he says he doesn't have those kind of urges. He just did it for the money and the opportunity, right? Or are you saying he got nabbed at 18? How much time did he have to become a serial killer here? Kevin, are you saying he's self-reported that he doesn't have those urges? Well, that's pretty convenient.
Redemption or freedom, that's not my place to decide that stuff. But what I do know is that he is a brilliant guy, and he spent 39 years in San Quentin, and he decided he wanted to be kind of the world's first profiler from prison. And so he studied the many serial killers that were around him.
Right. It wasn't that he was reliving his crime, reading about other people's crimes and salivating on it. He's now a profiler. He wanted to be the first profiler from prison, and he called himself a profiler, and voila, he's a profiler. Isn't that amazing how that happens?
Got in their heads, and you'll see he does have the IQ to do that kind of thing. And over the last several years, he's saying
he and the killer both have this incredible intellect to analyze crimes, even not liking it very much. It's just like this lucky talent, and he's not really that interested in true crime, but he somehow just has this miraculous talent. Somehow this killer just has this miraculous talent to analyze other crimes. Come on.
Trying to use the insights that he has and the mind that he has to help solve old cold cases. And he has solved one in particular. Now, won't be able to talk about it because he has a book that has been ready to be published for a while, but the police actually had him hold off on this. But it would be published in the fall.
The police have him hold off on it? Is it the case? The article I read was more than 6 years old. And it promised this book was coming out. Now it's the police are putting a hold on it because it's got such good insights. He doesn't want to tip any of the cases. That's why. I mean, how ridiculous is this narrative going to get before you say, I've been fooled, I've been conned? It can happen to all of us. Our ego, we can be flattered. We can be made to feel important. But this isn't controversial. This is damaging and dangerous.
Oh, there's a series coming out. I don't remember if it's on Netflix or what it's going to be on. He has a literary agent. He has a publisher. Hey, Thomas has made it. Thomas has had a long trip. He's at the LaGuardia. Thomas has had a day trip to New York. Hopefully it went well, Tom.
A killer has a manager and a literary agent. Do you ever think anything like our world has gone mad? Anything's gone wrong with our world when a killer has a literary agent and a manager? Does the victim's family have a literary agent and a manager? I wonder, how often does that happen? Very seldom, I think. But a killer story, ooh. This trend in true crime has got to stop, and you're continuing it.
And he's on the runway. Anyway.
And I don't mean you alone are continuing it. I mean, you're joining in, hopping in on the trend.
So Bill Noguera, he also, while he was in prison, became an artist. He started painting. And his art is so good that he ended up, his art's been shown from New York to Paris to London. So he's made the most of his time. But what he really wants, his own personal path.
Right. It's not that he made the most of his time in a bid to get out for the parole board to show them all the stuff he's done and to up his own ego and inflate his ego and his sense of importance, self-importance. He did it all for, right? It's just he's that good, guys. He's that good. Maybe Kevin should become a hype man for killers because he is hyping up this killer like crazy. What are you doing?
Path to redemption is to try to help get people insights into solving cold cases. So that's my interest.
Oh, that's how you get redemption? That's how, not putting down your head, doing your time quietly and causing no more pain for the victim's family. It's by constantly re-victimizing the victim's family, by getting on as many platforms as you can and elevating yourself in society. Who else besides this guy has said this guy's profiling has been useful? Name one person that's not in prison with him.
I'm not in law enforcement, so I don't expect to solve a cold case. But if I have the opportunity to apply my own insights and to get other people's insights, such as Jen Coffindaffer, retired FBI, or anybody else, but he has a special brand of insights himself.
Jen Coffindaffer, whose specialty is gangs and guns and has zero homicide experience. Zero.
That people in law enforcement could not have. And the reason for that is because he's been in prison with these guys. They would talk to him in a way that they wouldn't ever talk to law enforcement or to a psychiatrist. It's just different. So he's going to get different insights.
Right. This is like the appeal to authority. He's got special insights. He's got special proximity. He's special in every way, guys. All right. This is almost as much as I can take of this. I think I've made my point. And I don't, I just wish that this hope and wish that this trend in true crime, it's gotta stop. These killers are not special. They're all, in fact, remarkably alike. In how they all say the same stuff. Poor me. Special circumstances made me do it. But, I'm cutting it off before he goes into the fact that he says he was 18. Actually, hold on. Let me see if it's coming up soon.
Insights that you would ever get from the FBI profilers.
Right. He's better than the actual people who trained in this field because he's in prison and actually committed. The criminal is better than the profiler. That's what he's saying here because he's got proximity to other killers and has done it himself.
And I think there's a value in that. But to me, anybody that could potentially be useful and getting insights, it's worth talking to him. Now, there's been some complaints that I'm platforming him. Well, I understand that, but think about this. My channel is very, very small. Adding Bill to it does not in any way grow the numbers. If anything, it tends to reduce them a little bit. That's the effect that it's had. So it doesn't make me money. And it doesn't really expand the channel in any kind of significant way. But it does add to our knowledge base, not just mine, but every one of us here that's a regular that's paying attention to these shows.
Guys, we can all learn from this killer. He can all add to our knowledge base. And he goes on to say, just to spoiler alert, that he was 18 when he committed the crime and that his brain wasn't fully formed. It's brain overclaim syndrome. And I mean, it's the same thing he just said before. So he's talking out both sides of his mouth. is that the really dangerous killers have these urges in youth. So this guy was in youth when he committed this crime. He obviously had a dangerous urge to do it. So on one side of his mouth, he's saying he's dangerous. And out of the other side of his mouth, he's saying that he's really extraordinary and remorseful, a word that you never heard out of Navarro's mouth in any of the quotes that I read. Real remorse. It never mentioned the victims. And here is Kevin from Yellow Cottage Tales ghosting the victim in this case once again. Nowhere in the description, nowhere out of his mouth. It's just like they don't exist. And that causes great pleasure to the killer because he can still keep talking, but the victim can't. He won. What a nightmare. So I decided to come on my day off. This does not give me any pleasure to do, but I really feel like this has to be said. It's got to stop. We got to look at crime in a more realistic way that's more sensitive and honors the victims and their families. So that's what I have for today. Please hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. I'll be back tomorrow. Have a great day, everyone. I'll be at the Society page hosting a live at 7 p.m. Thank you, Society page, and thank you, Tommy D and Murder by Maestro, my mods. Thank you for moderating. I'll see you tomorrow, guys.